Picture this. It's August 1914. The German Empire has just kicked off a master plan for a lightning-fast victory in the Great War. But standing right in their path is a tiny, neutral nation and a ring of forts that nobody, and I mean nobody, expected to hold. So let's dive into the very first battle of World War I, the brutal, bloody, and completely unexpected Siege of Liege. And this, right here, is the big question, isn't it? Germany's entire war plan, which they'd spent years perfecting, was all about one thing: speed. So how on earth could a dozen concrete fortresses, in a country that wasn't even supposed to be in the fight, throw such a massive wrench in the gears of the world's most powerful army? To really get why Liege was such a big deal, we've got to first understand the German plan. It was this incredibly audacious strategy, and the whole thing was built on one single non-negotiable rule: they had to be fast. Yeah, you heard that right. 42 days. The German High Command genuinely believed they could knock France out of the war in just 6 weeks. See, their whole strategy was to get a quick, overwhelming win on the Western Front, so they could then spin their entire army around and face Russia in the east. There was zero room for error and absolutely no time for delays. And this high-stakes gamble had a name: the Schlieffen Plan. The Germans were terrified of being caught in a long war, fighting France and Russia at the same time. So the idea was, hey, let's not just charge straight at the heavily fortified French border. Instead, the German army was going to act like a giant swinging door, smashing right through neutral Belgium to get behind the French armies and trap them. So let's just break it down. It was pretty simple, on paper at least. Step 1, go around the big, scary French forts. Step 2, march through Belgium like it's not even there. Step 3, swing around and trap the French army. And Step 4, win the war. Easy, right? To the German planners, Belgium was just a convenient highway, not a real battlefield. Well, that assumption was about to be put to the test. And that test was waiting for them at Liege. This city was in the perfect strategic spot, right on the Meuse River, and it was surrounded by this formidable ring of concrete and steel, a true marvel of 19th century defensive engineering. A full dozen of them. 12 forts designed by the brilliant engineer Henri Brialmont stood guard around the city. And we're not talking about old-timey castles with moats. No. These were modern fortresses for their time, mostly underground, built with concrete and steel, and bristling with heavy guns. Now, you've got to understand, the Belgians weren't naive. They knew they couldn't beat Germany by themselves. The entire point of these forts, the very heart of their strategy, was to be the world's most stubborn speed bump. Their only job was to hold up an invasion just long enough for their big allies, Britain and France, to get their armies together and come help out. But, and this is a huge but, there was a problem. These forts were state-of-the-art in 1890. They were built to handle the biggest cannons of the 19th century. But by 1914, military technology had taken a massive leap forward. The Germans were rolling up with weapons the fort designers couldn't have even imagined. These colossal siege guns that fired shells literally the size of a person. It was a complete mismatch. David versus a Goliath with a rocket launcher. So, August 5th, 1914. The German army launches its attack. They figured they'd just punch through the gaps between the forts overnight, take the city in a quick raid, and be on their way. Instead, they ran smack into a wall of ferocious resistance. When the Germans sent an envoy to politely ask for the city's surrender, the Belgian commander, General Lehmann, gave them a pretty clear answer. He said, "Frayez-vous le passage," which means you must fight your way through. He and his 30,000 soldiers were planning to make the Germans pay for every single inch of ground. And that first German attack was an absolute, unmitigated disaster. Their troops were funneled down narrow roads and just torn to pieces by Belgian machine guns and artillery. It was pure chaos. In the darkness, units got lost, they fired on their own men, and the casualties were just horrific. The great German lightning plan had slammed to a halt on its very first day. But in the middle of all this failure, there was this one bizarre moment of German success. A staff officer, a guy named Erich Ludendorff, gets separated from his troops. On his own, he just boldly walks up to the citadel of Liège and, through sheer audacious bluffing, convinces the entire garrison inside to surrender. It was a tiny victory in a sea of failure, but it put a spotlight on a man who would become a major figure in the war. Okay, so the quick infantry rush failed.
Miserably. The Schlieffen Plan was already behind schedule. So the Germans had to switch to Plan B. It was time to stop trying to sneak around the forts and instead just go right through them with terrifying, overwhelming force. It was time for Goliath to pull out the big hammer.
The Belgians had definitely won the first round. They'd shown incredible courage. But Germany was about to bring in a weapon that would change siege warfare forever. They brought up the super heavy guns. And when I say heavy, I mean these things were absolute monsters. The most famous was the 420mm howitzer, which got the nickname Big Bertha. These cannons were a revolution in firepower, designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to turn concrete fortresses into dust. The fight was about to get very, very one-sided. And you can see the grim results right here. Once those guns started firing, it was inevitable. One by one, the forts were just systematically pulverized. Shell after shell rained down, shattering everything. The end was especially gruesome for Fort Lanson. It took a direct hit to its ammunition magazine, and the entire fortress just vanished in a single catastrophic explosion. And the human toll was just immense. In the smoking ruins of Fort Lanson, the Germans found the Belgian commander, General Liman. He'd been knocked out by the blast, but somehow he was still alive. His capture really signaled the end. On August 16th, 11 days after the whole thing started, the last Belgian fort surrendered. So Liège had fallen. The Germans were finally through. But that's not where the story ends. The real question, the one historians still argue about today, is whether the incredible sacrifice of those Belgian soldiers actually mattered. Did they really succeed in buying time? I mean, that's the bottom line, right? Was that 11-day delay actually long enough to mess up Germany's unstoppable timetable for victory? Or was it just a heroic, but ultimately a futile gesture? And what's fascinating is the answer really depends on who you ask. If you read the German official history, they basically said, no big deal, the siege ended just in time and we weren't delayed at all. The British, on the other hand, were convinced it bought the Allies a crucial 4 or 5 days. Most modern historians have kind of landed in the middle, saying the real delay to the German advance was probably about 48 hours. But whatever the actual delay was, it came at a staggering price. The Germans suffered thousands of casualties, which was a real shock for an army that expected a walk in the park. But the cost for the Belgians, it was just immense. An estimated 20,000 of their soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured defending their homes. So maybe, just maybe, counting the hours isn't the most important thing here. Maybe the real impact of the battle was psychological. As the historian John Buchan put it, it was a moral triumph. For the first time, it showed the world that the supposedly invincible German war machine could be stopped, that this giant had feet of clay. The story of brave little Belgium became this powerful rallying cry for the Allies. And that leaves us with one final big question. A 48-hour delay might not seem like much in a war that would drag on for 4 long years, but the Battle of Liège proved that Germany's dream of a quick, clean victory was a fantasy. It set a tone of brutal, bloody resistance that would define the rest of the war. So, how much is a symbol worth? How do you measure the value of a moral victory? That's the enduring legacy of those 12 forts on the Meuse.